Hi, this is Stan Bush.
Hi, this is Stephanie Calvert.
This is John Payne.
This is Jack Hughes.
Hey everyone, this is Britt Lightning from Vixen.
Hi, I'm Carrie Stevens.
Hello, I'm Kofi Baker.
And you're listening to Play That Rock and Roll.
Pivot from First Blood for a second. So I wanted to ask you about another book of yours that I read last, REVEILLE.
REVEILLE.
I really enjoyed that one, and I know that that book was, inspired by your love of westerns. But what I want to talk about with this book is something you mentioned just a few moments ago: is your research process.
Yeah.
I find the research process for nonfictions interesting. So, tell me a little bit more about the lengths that you went to achieve the historical accuracy.
Well, for people who don't know, it's in 1916, a Mexican bandit named Pancho Villa crossed the American line with his band of whatever and raided a New Mexican border town called Columbus. And as it happened, Columbus had a military base there. It wasn't a big one, but it was essentially where this is the period when cavalry were transitioning to mechanized. And that really, and again, it's Peckinpah, right? It's that theme that he had. And what happened is fascinating. The military there mounted up, and there was a running gun battle, and they went. Pancho Villa's people left the country, and we went after them to a degree, and then said, "Oh well, we're in Mexico. Maybe we ought to go back."
Right.
Well, the First World War was in progress. America had not yet entered, and it was known that the Germans were in Mexico, trying to encourage Mexico to maybe open another front or at least make themselves a nuisance. And the government met and decided, the Senate and the House of Representatives decided that they were going to send an armed column into Mexico after Villa. And the guy running it was, it's a disparaging term now, but he's known by it as Black Jack Pershing.
Oh yeah, General Pershing. Yeah.
And Patton was there as well, not yet a general.
Mm-hmm.
And there were two prongs. One went in from Columbus in New Mexico, and another prong went in from Arizona. And they were going to meet and then go on. And this was the first time American military had used automobiles. This was the first time they had used aircraft. This is the first time they had used machine guns. And
that's because they were trying it out because they saw WW1 on the horizon.
You got it. They were rehearsing for the First World War.
Right. Yeah.
And so the story is about that invasion. It's hard to imagine, but we invaded Mexico as seen through, and again, by now you can predict the characters. There's a young man who's who's in there, and suddenly here's the attack. He just shows up in Columbus, and that night there's the gun battle. And the other person is a scout whose name is Miles Callender, and I wouldn't do this these days, but Miles Callender, Space and Time, because he was old enough, he is old enough to have been in this as a child, as a youngster in the Civil War. He was in the Indian Wars as a scout. He was in Cuba. He was in the Philippines. And this is his last campaign. And he decides to teach this youngster what it's all about and how to survive. And in the process, the youngster begins to despise him.
Yeah.
and because of the necessity of the stark values that it takes to survive in combat. Anyhow, I just loved the idea, and I did go to Columbus. I went down there and looked, and amazingly, this would have been in 74, 75, somewhere in there. I went down with my family on a car trip, and it wasn't that different from photographs in 1916. And you could see there was a mound where I can't remember now if there was a flagpole where where the military flags as well as the flag for the United States. And you could see where the barracks had been. They're gone now, but you could see the layout. And there was like 2 streets. It was like an old Western town. And I thought, oh, this is just, it's like, a time warp.
Yeah.
And then I dove in, I read everything I could about that period.
And with that review of, I mean, are you talking about like military records? Are you talking about previous books, or what was the documents that you went through?
Well, I went through the New York Times and similar newspapers on microfilm to see what they were saying. And in fact, the book begins with portions of newspaper accounts.
Right. Yep.
And then I went through, history of Mexico, history of the cavalry in the United States, history of, what was going on the border at that time, and prelude to World War I. I mean, these things, it just keeps going. You've got to want to learn. And I loved it. And it's John Wayne is said, my agent told me that Wayne's representative said that he gave some thought to playing the character, but Wayne was very ill at the time.
Right. Yep.
And the other issue was that apparently John Wayne's son, one of them, said that he thought the parallel between the young and the older man would maybe be conceived as too close to the parallel in Red River.
Oh, okay.
And so nothing moved forward. But it was a disappointment because John Wayne is a fine movie actor.
Oh, absolutely.
And people get mixed up in the politics.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at, and we could debate all day about the Searchers and the problems with the Searchers. But if you look at Red River or The Shootist as, I mean, oh boy, I mean, and this man knew I think Richard Crenna would have added John Wayne to the Steve McQueen, Sylvester Stallone. So Stephen King once told me, Steve and I were close for many years. Not that we had a falling out, but friendships sometimes evaporate.
Yep.
Steve told me that he thought it was one of my best books.
Wow. That's quite a compliment. When it comes to, I was just going to ask you about this. So, that comes out in the late 70s. I guess there was some
77.
talk. Yeah, there was some talk about perhaps making a film out of it.
Not much.
Not much.
A little bit. We have to remember the 70s. There were a lot of really good Westerns made in the 70s. People say, in reaction to the Wild Bunch, in 69, the Wild Bunch, thereafter, films either deliberately followed the old traditions to say the Wild Bunch didn't matter, or else they used the Wild Bunch's revisionistic view to move forward. And you get wonderful movies like Lozana's Raid, which is a Burt Lancaster movie, which is a avowed parallel to the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
And so you get a lot of Vietnam War disguised Westerns, or else you get, like Little Big Man, socially conscious Westerns. And it was a great time, but in 81, when did Heaven's Gate come out?
Oh yeah, that's 80,
and that was the end, for a decade. Westerns were, because that movie was, and we can debate the merits of the movie.
Right.
But there's no question that was a tremendous failure financially. And it wasn't until Dances with Wolves in the 90s, and then the Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie. And let's give Kevin Costner for mention his name with Dances with Wolves. That Westerns came back. So there was that period where, yes, the Westerns were popular, and then suddenly they weren't. And so, given how long it takes to develop a movie, I'm not surprised that there was a hesitancy to go after that as a film project.
Well, this is just a fun little thought experiment I had when I was reading the book, because in my mind, when I was reading the book, I thought, what if this was made into a film shortly after First Blood, the movie, was released, and
Yes.
because that was a hit. And in my mind, I cast Nick Nolte as Miles Callender and Emilio
Okay.
Estevez as Prentice. So I don't know what to do with that information, but I thought you might get a kick out of it.
Well, I think you need somebody who is who could have had all those years of military experience. George C. Scott was a name that was talked about. It has to be a much older, perhaps, than you mentioned, and somebody who's much perhaps younger than you
Yeah.
mentioned for it to work. Yeah, almost all my novels have been optioned for movies. A few got made, but that's the way the movie business is. But Last Reveille was never optioned.
Oh, interesting.
That's one of the few that never ever happened. And whatever.
Well, hey, Kevin Costner is still out there right now making westerns. I say there's still time.
Well,
Let's
we
give him a
wish
call.
Kevin luck. I saw Horizon in the theater, and I'm not sure the movie coheres,
Ugh.
but damn, it's good looking.